Okay, everybody, let's get started. Thanks for coming in. It's good to see everybody again. Once again, we're combining Mr. V's class and my class. And I'm going to hand it over to Miss J in just a second. She's got a nice activity for you to do. But I just wanted to let you guys know, and honestly, probably you guys have already done this, but don't forget that assignments go from Wednesday to Tuesday. So all your assignments from this week were due yesterday. So I know those of you in my fourth bell, I checked a lot of missings in progress books. So make sure you get those in. We do take late work, but just make sure you get those turned in. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. J, and she is going to run you through today's activity.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a good morning. So I'm first going to start with going over this upcoming week's assignments. So if we're looking at class, we have got our normal weekly assignment checklist. So you can reference this checklist, make sure that you are completing all of your assignments for the week. It shows that you're supposed to be in Zoom class today. And we'll be doing a Google Doc in class that you will fill out and turn in at the end of class. You're also going to watch a YouTube video on the presidents, take a president's quiz, and then another YouTube video with a Google Doc, and then the weekly review video. So starting off the Zoom class, Google Doc is going to be underneath the Zoom class assignment. So we'll be doing this at the end of class. The next thing that you have to do is to watch this YouTube video on the presidents. There is also a Word document that you can use to look up other things about the presidents, as well as the presentation given in the YouTube video is linked on here as well. So you can go through that after you watch the presentation. So your first step is to watch the presentation on the presidents. Make sure you take good notes, because then you're going to take a quiz on Google Forms, and it is going to be covering the information that you learned in the YouTube video. So that's why it's very important you watch that video first. So that's your first assignment. Your second assignment will be about critical presidential decisions. So you'll be watching an interview with former President George Bush. You will start at minute 7 of the video, and then you're going to answer the questions on the Google Doc that go along with the video. All the answers will be in the video, so make sure you watch the thing from minute 7 all the way through the end and answer all the questions. And then lastly, we've got a weekly review video and review chart. As usual, make sure you are actually writing what you understood from the video. If you just write, "I understood everything," I do not know whether or not you watch the video. So just make sure that you are making some bullet points of things mentioned in the video that you're like, yes, I have that, I understand it. But if you have any questions about anything, make sure you put it on the things that I need help with tab, and we will try and find you new resources, new videos, Quizlets, articles, or even just another explanation from us that can help you with anything that you may not understand. Does anyone have any questions about this upcoming week's assignments? All right, great. So we are going to be I'm going to be reviewing this past week with you all. I'm going to be using Pear Deck, so I have linked that in your chat so you can access it. And then you all will be able to go to that link and then type in the code. It's NYEFAS at joinpd.com. Again, the link is in the chat, but you can also just type in joinpd.com. and type in the code. I will give you guys just a couple moments to join. Awesome, we got one. I'll give you guys just another minute to get on. Okay, I'm going to start the presentation. However, if you either need to get back on or you're still not in yet, you can join anytime during the presentation. The code is in the upper right-hand corner. It's NYEFAS. But I just want to make sure, we get you out of here on time. So this past week, we kind of looked at presidential elections. And you guys did another assignment over modern presidential powers, which is really important to look at because you guys got the opportunity to look at a lot of current events or at least more modern events done by presidents and kind of gotten to see how they use their presidential powers in the modern day. So you guys looked at the president being the head of state. So you guys got to see how the president in the modern day represents the United States and the people who live in the United States. With the advancement of technology, I mean, that has super changed. The connection that we have to the president is like ever changing. With the start of the television, we got to see the president and listen to them more. They became more accessible. And then throughout time, it's just become even more so. I mean, think about our conversations with how the president should be handling themselves on Twitter. We get to see we could potentially see what the president is thinking all the time. So we really want somebody who we feel is a representation of its people. So that is a way that the modern presidential power has grown. Another presidential power that you guys got to look at in the modern day was enforcing laws. So you guys got to look at different ways that the presidents have done this. You get to see different executive orders that they've passed, how they've become the head of the executive branch, kind of what direction they're taking it in. You get to look at things such as presidential appointments, who they're putting into those head secretary positions, what kind of things they're looking to accomplish as president. Another thing you got to look at was diplomatic powers. So diplomatic powers is another thing that the president in the modern day has really gotten to grow and expand upon because it's a lot easier for us now with modern technology, modern travel, to have a lot more connection with those foreign nations. It wasn't until 1908 that our first president ever traveled abroad. That was Teddy Roosevelt. He went down to the Panama Canal. So that's only been about a little over 100 years of our presidents being able to travel to other nations because of, the advancement in travel. So while they're able to do so, they negotiate, they work on and sign treaties with other nations, and they just kind of work on our relations with other countries. So you guys got to find some current events in that. You also got to look at the president's legislative influence. We get to see a lot of what the presidents are pulling for, what kind of acts and laws that they would like to get passed in Congress, and how they're kind of going to push for that and work for bipartisan approval for these sorts of things. What are they going to do in order to get these passed in Congress with both parties' approval? Another modern presidential power that's kind of grown and changed has been the commander-in-chief. The president is still obviously using its constitutional duties that are given for commander-in-chief. However, the way that they've been able to institute that has kind of changed in the modern day. So I'm sure there was a lot of different current events that you guys got to look at, or at least recent events that you got to look at on how the president has utilized their position as commander-in-chief. Remember, pardons and reprieves are another issue that the presidents, or another power the presidents get to utilize. So they get to issue pardons, which means if somebody has been convicted of a crime, they get to kind of excuse them for it. They say, I will take away the crime that you have been given or you've been charged with. A reprieve is when they put a stay on a punishment. So if somebody is on death row, the president can say, I'm going to put a stay on your execution. You are not going to be executed at the time that it says. So that is a presidential power that we see presidents use a lot in the modern day. Another one is appointment powers. You guys are probably hearing a lot about this in the news if you're watching that at all, because with the new president, with President Biden, he is going to have to appoint a whole new cabinet. And you kind of get to look at his decisions and see what ways or what direction he would like to take our country in. By who he's appointing and kind of what those people's goals are. They're also going to be the people that kind of work with him and consult with him and kind of give him advice on how to handle certain situations. So that's why those appointments are pretty important. And then lastly is the head of the political party. So we hear a lot about political parties, how it's kind of been polarizing in our current political climate. And so the president is the head of, the Democrat or Republican Party. And so kind of what that party is following and what that party stands for will be represented a lot in the president. So that's an important thing to look at, kind of how these parties are changing or what they are starting to really, show what they think is important and what direction they want to take the party in. So I just made a list of notable presidential actions because I was kind of going through and looking at these and thinking like, what were some big things that presidents have done that have really like utilized their power that we hear a lot about. So this way you guys can kind of see why it's so important that we learned about these presidential powers, because some of their decisions can be really big and impact our nation a lot. So starting off, you've got Abraham Lincoln. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. That was one of his executive powers that he had. He was able to give the executive order to free the slaves in the United States and make them free people. He was exercising his power as head of the executive branch. Another one would be FDR. So during the Great Depression, FDR created what was called the Works Progress Administration. So he used his executive power to start this administration and put people in charge of it in order to create new jobs, new ways for people to make money and try and help get us out of the Great Depression. A lot of people were unemployed, and that was the solution he found for that. During the Vietnam War, we talk a lot about how the president gets to send armed troops at places, but former President Nixon, before he resigned, pulled the troops from Vietnam. So you get to see him act as commander-in-chief to actually bring troops back to America and take them out of fighting. After Nixon, after he resigned, Nixon was involved in a scandal called Watergate. He was pretty much about to be charged with this crime. And Gerald Ford, his predecessor, the new president, pardoned Nixon. So that was a pretty big pardon. So he forgave Nixon of the crimes he committed while he was in office. So that was, that was a pretty big deal. And so it just shows the power that the presidential pardon can have. In a little bit more modern times, we saw former President Bush send troops to Iraq. So that was a big use of the commander-in-chief role that the president has, and you'll actually get to learn more about that in your upcoming assignment this week. President's influence on the legislative branch can really bring about change. Under Obama, the Affordable Care Act was passed. So he worked really closely with the legislative branch to get that passed. And then ultimately he signed off on that law after it got passed through both sides of Congress in the House and the Senate. And that became kind of one of the big things that former President Obama was known for. And then one of the things that former President Trump really worked on was strengthening immigration protocols. He wanted stricter immigration rules, so he used his executive power to pass some of those executive orders. And then although Biden has only been in the presidency for a couple weeks now, the last I checked, he was up to 42 executive orders. So he is already using his powers as president. That is something he's able to do. He gets to pass those executive orders as head of the presidential branch. But I just wanted to show you how those presidential roles and powers can really be used to create big change in our society. Does anyone have any questions about any of the presidential powers? Okay, great. So the other thing we looked at was the Electoral College, and you guys learned 270 to win. So a candidate needs 270 Electoral College votes at least to win an election. So what does that mean? The president is actually elected by the Electoral College. They are not directly elected by citizens. Instead, citizens will vote in their state, and then whoever wins that state sends their electoral votes for that candidate. And you're thinking, okay, so how does each state, how many electoral votes do they get? That is based on state population. So the bigger the state you are, the more election or electoral votes you get. The smaller the state, the less you'll get. So each state for sure gets 2 votes because it's based on the number of senators you have and the number of representatives you have. Every state has at least 2 senators. So every state gets at least 2 votes. The votes based on the House of Representatives, or how many representatives you have, is based on population. So even the smallest state gets at least 1 vote from the, because they have at least 1 member in the House of Representatives. Bigger states have more people in the House of Representatives, so they get more votes. The only state that, or the only non-state that has votes is the District of Columbia. The DC has 3 votes in the Electoral College. And you're thinking, why would they do this? Like, why wouldn't they just make a general election or a direct election? The framers, when they were writing the Constitution and established the Electoral College, thought, we really want to make sure it is not just the people in the big states voting for somebody that is going to help, their big state. We want somebody who has to think about the interest of the whole United States. And so they kind of wanted to make it a little bit more even. So they wanted to give some smaller states some power in the election as well. So they just really wanted there to be more of a balanced influence in election between large states and smaller states. This being said, this does mean that a person can win the popular vote, but not win the election. This just happened back in 2016. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but she did not win enough of the big states with, or enough numbers in the Electoral College in order to win the Electoral College vote. So a visual representation of this is the map from the 2020 election. So if you think about Ohio, because of the number of people we have living here, gets 17 votes in the Electoral College. So your vote very much still does matter. Don't think just because it's being elected by the Electoral College, oh, I shouldn't vote, it doesn't matter. It absolutely does. Your vote matters in Ohio. So whoever wins Ohio is going to get those 17 votes sent to the candidate. So Trump won our state. He got more votes in the state of Ohio. So he got 17 votes in the Electoral College. So it's still very important, and your vote will hold power still, because it'll influence who your state electors vote for. There's only 2 states on the map that you can kind of see different little blocks inside of. Maine and Nebraska are 2 states that split their votes. So if the other candidate gets enough votes, they will then send one of their Electoral College votes to that candidate. So I have given you a slide that you all can type in questions on the Electoral College if you have them. I'm going to leave this slide up here even when you guys go into breakout rooms. So if you think of any questions, you can shoot them in there. And then after the breakout room, if anyone has any, I'll address the questions, because I know sometimes it can be kind of confusing. But I want to send you into your breakout room so you have plenty of time to do that. So looking at it, after you get into your breakout room, you are going to come to your Zoom class assignment tab on Google Classroom. You're going to open the Google Doc, and you're going to see this chart right here. What I'm kind of asking you to think about is, now that you all are so educated on the presidency, you're going to get to think about, what have the presidents been focusing on, or what have past candidates been focusing on in presidential elections? You get to use your assignment from last week, the modern presidential powers, to see some of those current events and see where the presidents have really been putting their power. And you can also, I linked a voting guide from this past election. So you can go through and you can see, okay, the candidates were really focusing on these issues. And then you're going to think about, okay, although this is what they've been focusing on, this is how they've been using their powers, what do you think the president should actually be doing? What powers do you think the president should be using to create change in our society? And you'll get to discuss this with your breakout rooms. You'll just get to make bullet points under each category. And then underneath, you're going to just summarize your beliefs. Is there any questions about the assignments that you're going to be doing in the breakout room?
Um, which which assignment is it on in classwork?
Sorry, what was that?
Which assignment is it under in classwork?
Oh, it is under Zoom class presidential powers, and it's under this week, the 2.3 through 2.9 tab. So if you go to this week's assignments and then click the Zoom class presidential powers assignment.